Our scriptures for today comes from Judges chapter 6, verses 12 through 22, and chapter 7, verses 9 and 10, and 13 through 15. Listen for the word of the Lord. When the angels of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." Gideon replied, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." And the Lord said, "I will wait until you return." Gideon went inside, prepared a young goat, and from an ephah of flour he made bread without yeast. Putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot, he brought them out and offered them to him under the oak. The angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on this rock and pour out the broth." And Gideon did so. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of his staff that was in his hand. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." During that night, the Lord said to Gideon, "Get up and go down against the camp, because I am going to give it to your hands. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah." Gideon arrived just as a man was telling a friend his dream. "I had a dream," he was saying. "A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed." His friend responded, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed down and worshipped. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, "Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into our hands." This is the word of the Lord. As we continue to work our way through the Old Testament, we find ourselves in the book of Judges. Now, the 8th chapter of our book, the story, is entitled "A Few Good Men and Women." The chapter begins with Joshua's death at the age of 110, and we are told that that generation whom he led into the promised land, as they began to die, the next generation did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals and the Asheroths, the gods of the pagan cultures that surrounded them. Because of this sin, God permitted raiders to plunder all the Israelites had, and they were unsuccessful battling against them because they had forsaken God. We see judges were raised up by God to lead the people, but when they would die, the people went back to their disobedient and chaotic ways. There is a lot that happens in the book of Judges, and we could spend weeks find in this time that Israel is in the state of national identity crisis. They had forgotten their special relationship to God as they adapted to the culture around them and began the tragic cycle of obedience, disobedience, punishment, lament, repentance, obedience, disobedience, punishment, and so on. This is a cycle that they would continue to go throughout the Old Testament. They now find themselves at the mercies of the Midianites, who use and abuse them relentlessly. In their hunger and weakness, the Israelites appealed to God, and when they cried out to him, he sent them a prophet to remind them of who they are and what they had done, saying, "The Lord brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. He rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and delivered you from the hand of all of your oppressors. He drove them out before you and gave you their land. He said to you, 'I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live.' But you have not listened to me." So, this is the backstory of the scriptures that I had read earlier concerning Gideon. In it, Gideon immediately begins to question the messenger of the Lord. Where is God? Why has he abandoned us? Why does God allow us to suffer? These questions do not faze this messenger of God. He commands Gideon to go in the strength you have and save Israel from Midian. But how did Gideon respond? By touting his inadequacies. I can see him standing there saying, "Are you kidding me? Do you know my family? Do you know me? And I am the worst of them all." He couldn't believe that God of Israel was telling him that he was a mighty warrior and that he would rescue Israel. Gideon is in that place where he wants to believe and was almost persuaded to believe, but could God just give him a sign so that he would know God was really with him? Gideon doesn't do this just once or twice, but 3 times. 3 times he asks God to prove that he is with him by a sign. I think Gideon's reaction is so typical of what we see today when there's an overwhelming issue and people want to believe that God hasn't abandoned them. They are almost persuaded to believe. But does God know my family? Does God know me and all the things that I have done or I have failed? God is calling you today. He does not care where you have come from or where you have been. He only cares about where you are going. God, give me a sign. This is a statement that we so haphazardly use. God, give me a sign if you want me to, whatever it is that the person has in mind that they want to do. But is it really God calling? Is it scriptural? Does it produce love and joy and peace and forbearance, kindness and goodness and faithfulness, gentleness and self-control within you and within the relationships around you? God, give me a sign. If you don't see God's miracles around you, then maybe you need to begin to seek his kingdom and his righteousness so that your eyes are open to recognize the things he is working on in your life today. When the Israelites cried out to God in the midst of their oppression, it was their last resort. They had no other answer to the problem they faced. Their problem wasn't really the Midianites, though it was an issue that stemmed from their faith that they had in God. It was founded on their self-serving desires and ambitions and not the love and gratitude for the Lord. Each character in the book of Judges had issues. Things that could have held them back from serving God, but they trusted God's word and he used them to lead his people, to save his people. These few good men and women who against all other odds were nothing or no one special in the world's eyes. But God used them to change the path of the Israelites in the ancient world. As we examine the Old Testament, we find they sought God only in times of crisis. But what about when times were good? Well, it's much like today. When times were good, they went their own way, under their own power. Today, we need to examine our own faith. Do we call on the Lord because we love and appreciate him for who he is and what he has done, or because of what we think we can get from him? Do you still want a sign that God is with you? Let me suggest the most obvious sign that we have been given: the cross. We see it every time we enter a church, and we see it all around us, whether it's on someone's necklace, or on their bumper sticker, or on the side of a road as a memorial to someone who has passed. The cross is a reminder that Jesus Christ of Nazareth lived, died, and was resurrected. Jesus was the Messiah that no one ever expected. He was not the rich, warring king from Bethlehem who rode into Jerusalem on his white